Classroom. One of my favorite strategies is greeting my students at the door every morning. I have a greeting menu that is posted next to me on the door. The students are able to choose how they greet me. Some greetings include handshakes, rock, paper, scissors, morning song, dance, and a hug. My students absolutely love doing this every morning. It is a quick and fun way to check in with each student and make sure they feel a part of our classroom community. Many of them even want to do a greeting after recess and lunch. They just can't get enough. I feel like this is an important part of our day, and it truly builds a positive relationship with each and every student. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Crum. In my classroom, I've been using a few of the components. The one I like the most is Good Things. Every morning, the kids have a few minutes to share good things that are happening in their lives, and they really like that because they love to talk about themselves. I did notice that it's really setting a positive tone in my classroom. I had one student who I know she wanted to share something bad because she fell and she hurt her leg, but she turned it around and she shared that she was doing really good before she fell. So it's really improving the attitude of the kids and the positive tone in our class. And also, I noticed that some of my kids who do have negative things happening a lot, they're changing. They're starting to be more positive. Another thing I think is really good about it is that it helps them connect to their home lives. And also, building relationships is so important in the classroom, and I really think this is a way for us to get to know each other and just become a community. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Carrie Perkins. I teach 5th grade at Golden Hills Elementary, and I wanted to take a couple minutes and share the benefits that Capturing Kids' Hearts has had on my classroom. You can clearly see the significant and positive impact the strategies that we were taught have given my students. Specifically, I wanted to talk about something called the social contract. The first week of school, as a class, we collectively reflected on how we wanted to be treated by others in general during conflict, and they also brainstormed and reflected on how they wanted to be treated by myself, the teacher. We created a giant list, and I mean giant, it was huge, of words, including things like respectful, sincere, kindness, and we posted it in the classroom for everyone to view at all times. All the students signed it, and the idea was that we practice those concepts when we treat others, and slowly over time, we'd be able to be more kind to one another. I was blown away with how my students responded. Before I could promote or model our expectations, students were already mastering it, and it was so inspiring to see young kids treat others with compassion and courtesy. It has become such a staple and norm in our class that we even ask all visitors and guests to sign it. I'm looking forward to this year and implementing more Capturing Kids' Heart strategies. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Pacheco, and I teach 3rd grade at Golden Hills. The Capturing Kids' Heart strategy that I have adopted in my class, along with the Good Things and social contract, has been the use of nonverbal tool, which is use of hand signals. And through these hand signals, students are able to be redirected instantly. They can check each other's behaviors and can call a foul if a classmate broke the social contract. Up to this point, students are holding each other accountable and are responsible for their actions by using these hand signals. Students are able to easily remember and use these hand signals throughout the day. It helps my classroom run a lot smoother because students are able to use them and they can check each other. It also teaches students self-awareness. I've had students tell each other, "You're breaking the social contract, so you got to check yourself." And students often refer to the social contract when using their hand signals, which shows that students are engaging and utilizing the strategies used. Having the social contract and the hand signals is helping establish a class community that respects and follows through on our own expectations that we set as a class. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie Haverly, art teacher, THS. Research has shown that when students feel connected to their school and staff, they achieve higher academic success and are less likely to have attendance, tardies, or behavior issues. Through our Capturing Kids' Heart trainings, we, the teachers, have been working on making those connections with our students, whether that be in a class of 26 or in my case, 180 students a day. We are trying very hard to make that work. As you heard, we are doing that through many ways such as morning greetings, good things, social contracts, and hand signals. What I've found with most students, they want to be treated with kindness and respect. I believe that is universal for all people. I know through this training, we are better equipped to make those connections with our students and to support them in whatever they may need. We appreciate the trainings the district and the board has enabled us to attend. We look forward to this school year and all the amazing efforts by our students. Thank you.
Huge thank you to all of the teachers that shared this evening. I think we need to give a hooray. Hooray! Thank you again for sharing. Really appreciate insights into your classroom and just hearing firsthand from you how the strategies are working. We have another Capturing Kids' Hearts training coming up that will be held this Friday and Saturday. So we're continuing to onboard team members and give those opportunities for those who have not had a chance yet to get familiarized with the different strategies. Okay, next slide, please. So moving on, also tied to student social emotional well-being is our Character Counts program, which focuses on specific character traits or attributes that we want our students to model and embrace. And you may have noticed it on your way in, or you may not have, but with the help and innovation from Deb Haberly, who you just heard from, we are personalizing the Character Counts posters and banners district-wide and replacing those posters with our own students and their own school colors. So if you didn't see them on the way in reception, take a peek. Those posters have been replaced, and then the ones that are out here on the pillars outside the district office, those are being replaced as well with, again, our students. And over the next couple of months, you'll see those going up at all of our school sites with their own school colors and their own students to model these different character traits. So thank you, Deb, for your assistance with that. Adalia and Jackie and the team in my office have done a lot of work to get those going and get those in place. So now we'll move on to the next slide, something a little bit more traditional and familiar, talking about enrollment. This slide shows you the comparison for this year's count for this point in the school year compared with last year. And you'll see that we are 63 students up at this point in the year. Of course, this isn't giving you a long-term trajectory looking at, our declining enrollment over the last 10 years, but does give you that snapshot of this point in the school year compared with last year at this time. And we'll go ahead and go on to the next slide and look at attendance. That once again, you can see by looking at this. This is just very, very brief snapshot look. You'll see year to date for this school year is the green, and this same time frame last year is the yellow. So it's good to see that attendance is continuing to improve, even though we all know COVID is here with us, probably here to stay. It's nice to see that those attendance numbers coming up at the start of the school year. Next slide, please. Brief sports update for you. Many of our THS athletes are back in action. Our boys varsity football had a great start to the season with a very decisive win over Burroughs, 52-0. And there will be a home game coming up this Friday when our boys go head-to-head with Bakersfield Highland. Also, our girls tennis is underway. They had their first competition today against Bakersfield High School. And then our girls volleyball is ramping up, and I believe they have their first match coming up on Thursday, so go Lady Warriors. Next slide, please. Boardroom bulletin boards. You see we have the boards decorated for this month of August, and I'm going to invite Miss Andrea Paxton, our Chief Administrator of Instructional Services, up just to walk you through the boards and what Instructional Services has planned for this school year.
Good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Larson Everson. Our board basically has some snapshots of things that went on at the beginning of the school year, and then some activities like our 3rd grade and 5th grade camp last year. And then in the Hearts, we have all of the programs we oversee at each of the school sites. And so we have had some new people in our office, so I just want to take a minute to introduce everybody. On the left, we have Maudie and Josie, who are our translators, and they take care of all of our LPAC testing. So right now they're in the beginning stages of our initial LPAC testing. And then we have Dan Irwin, the second picture, and he is in charge of all of our student management system. He helps with CalPads, and he has been super busy over, I would say, at least the last month, which is the hardest part of his job, is getting all those kids into our systems and get all of the programs syncing with that. And then the next picture is myself. And then we have Jennifer Butler, which I think that you guys are all familiar with, who's in charge of our MTSS program. Terry Boston, who's our instructional coach on First Best Instruction. And then we have a new instructional coach on the left with the yellow dress. Her name is Megan Hill, and she is overseeing our English Language Learner program. And then we have a new secretary that joined us at the end of last year, Yanira, and she comes sometimes and fills in for Adalia when she's gone. Okay. And so last year, the focus in instructional services, our students returned to full-time in-person learning. So instructional services was focused on closing learning gaps that developed during distance learning, to identify the gaps using universal screeners, and that was a new initiative last year. The re-entry to school, we focused on student engagement, which included social, emotional, and academic engagement. Instructional services support students and teachers by providing professional development, making data-driven decisions on instructional materials, practices, and strategies. Okay. And so multi-tiered systems of support continues to be an initiative that we're carrying forward this year. It's a multi-year initiative. So last year we implemented a multi-tiered systems of support program district-wide. Each site developed a leadership team that met at the district office throughout the school year, and then went back to the school site to support the implementation of MTSS by providing professional development at the sites. Through the MTSS process, a needs assessment was completed. Sites developed goals based on identified needs, and an implementation plan was created. This year, we will continue our work in this throughout the school year with an emphasis on strengthening the Tier 1 portion of MTSS, which is the instruction that all students receive. We want to deliver our very best during our first instruction that so fewer students need intervention and remediation. Okay. And so our goals for this year, or our focus for the 22-23 school year, as Superintendent Larson Everson stated, we're implementing Capturing Kids' Hearts. So we're continuing with that implementation. Instructional services, we're hosting another training this weekend, and then we're going to be at the site supporting the implementation of that process, and also providing additional trainings during the school year to certificated and classified staff members. We're focused on supporting new teachers at each of the sites. Our coaches have visited every new teacher multiple times during the school day since the very first day of school. So we're really focused on making sure that they're having a successful year. We want to ensure that they get the support that they need in order to be successful in the classroom. Instructional coaches will be assisting with lesson planning, classroom management strategies, and conducting demonstration lessons. We are continuing with our 3rd and 5th grade camps this year, and then also adding an 8th grade sleepaway camp at Camp Keep, which is located near Morro Bay. We will be offering professional development for staff members throughout the year that focuses on the use of thinking maps, utilizing the data from our universal screeners to make sound instructional decisions, furthering our work on icons of depth and complexity to increase higher level thinking in the classroom, and implement effective grading practices that provide students with timely feedback. And that's what we hope to accomplish by the end of the year. So
Thank you, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Paxton. Okay, we're almost wrapped up on superintendent update. Wanted to move on to the slide for upcoming dates and events. Be providing you with the events that are happening for the month of September. You can see them all listed up there. Most importantly, want to draw your attention to kind of in the middle of the slide, the bolded item on Tuesday, September 13th. That's our regular scheduled board meeting that will be right here in the boardroom at 5 p.m. And believe it or not, that concludes my update for this evening. Thank you all.
Thank you, Superintendent. TAT update. Do we have an update tonight, Ms. Bowman? Yes, we do.
So I have a bit of laryngitis, so forgive me if I sound raspy. All right, good evening, President Weinstein, members of the school board, Superintendent Larson Everson, and members of the public. My name is Val Bowman, and I am the president of the Tehachapi Association of Teachers. The 22-23 school year is upon us, and this beginning is reminiscent of years past. It's been nice to see student faces. Students are somewhat shy and reserved at this point as they become comfortable in their new environments or classes. Teachers are getting to know their kids as they establish the routines and get to know the names they are connecting to faces. THS and JMS Sports are taking off too. JMS Sports too, yes. Connections are happening between parents, students, and teachers at every site and all around the community. It's been nice to see board members at events like back to school nights and the welcome back event at the park and just all around. But TAT is honestly missing one face this year. Gary Parrott was a unit member and a teacher in TUSD for decades. He taught hundreds of students and worked endlessly for teachers' rights and protections. Gary was a well-known collector, often acquiring his treasures at local yard sales, where he had many opportunities to spin yarns and entertain with his corny puns. Gary was everyone's friend and someone I had actually known since I was 20 years old. I worked with him at the Boys and Girls Club in Santa Barbara. He's really missed. Everybody really misses him. But still in a line from the 1970s, we keep on trucking. So Capturing Kids' Hearts training has provided opportunities to improve campus culture, which will make for safer schools. Wednesday trainings will give teachers more educational tools for their toolboxes, and collaboration days will give everyone a chance to plan and work as a team. Teachers are joining committees and planning for many events beyond their lessons. During the summer, the TAT PAC committee specifically, sent out a bit more than 13,500 postcards to all eligible Tehachapi voters in hopes of encouraging people to run for open positions. All positions now have candidates, and it's TAT's hope that those cards made a difference. Now, TUSD board candidates are starting their campaigns. The TAT PAC committee will, within the next week or so, send out surveys to those running, and once those surveys are returned, interviews will commence to determine who TAT and CTA will back. The timeline is tight and interviews will happen soon. It's been a good start to the year, and TAT believes it will be a good year. Thank you.
Thank you. CSEA update. Do we have a PTO update tonight? Okay, moving on to board communications. Trustees, do you have any communications you'd like to share this evening?
I was very impressed with the back-to-school event I attended, so I was very impressed.
I also went to the welcome back, and it was high energy, and it was really fun to be a part of it. I went to Cummings Valley back to school night, and I felt that was really well-attended, and everybody, all the teachers and everything were great support for their new principal. I have a positive feeling for that, so.
So I did a few things, not much different than Rick or Jackie. The JMS, what was it? Mr. Lowe, what was it called when everybody, parents checked out all their stuff for their kids? Thank you. Went to the orientation, well organized. People flowed in and out of all the different areas. There were donuts, in case anybody wants to know. That's always important to me. Then I've been to Cummings Valley back to school night. I was at JMS's back to school night. Then we've got the high school one coming up on the 31st, and I think Tompkins was moved to the 25th, correct? This Thursday as well. So it is nice to see the kids out there, the parents out there, teachers, staff, and board members, and the superintendent. I think you've been everywhere that I've been, plus more, I'm sure. So it's nice to see all the activity and all the positiveness and things just flowing with a new normal.
Thank you. Good comments back. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, public comments. Public comments will be allowed. The board president will recognize any member of the audience wishing to speak on items not on the agenda but directly related to school business. Pursuant to Board Bylaw 9323, the board will limit comments to no more than 3 minutes per person. Public comment will also be allowed on each specific action item prior to board action. The president may allot time to those wishing to speak, but no action will be taken on matters presented and no discussion of non-agenda items will occur. If appropriate, the president or any member of the board may direct that a matter be referred to the superintendent's office for placement on a future agenda. I do have a couple of the goldenrod sheets of paper, and if anyone else in the audience has a comment, please don't let me forget you, raise your hand. I'd like to start out with Mr. Alex Trumbull. Good evening. If you could state your name for the record.
Yes, I'm Alex Trumbull, father of 3 in school currently in this district. And I wanted to talk about the transportation that we currently have for school and the lack thereof. So I guess I didn't get in time to get my kids a bus pass, so it's difficult trying to go to work, my wife and I, and get the kids to school on time. So this is probably an issue for a lot of other parents as well. I'm currently on a wait list, but I had some options. I don't know if you guys have already discussed this, but possibly adjusting the schedule for the school and the students to compensate, because it seems like all the schools start at the same time and the lack of bus drivers that we currently have is an issue. So also, I know school districts, make money by kids getting to school. So another option would be, I see a lot of parents driving their kids into school too. Is there a stipend for driving your own kids? Maybe that would implore some open seats on buses, and especially low-income families that have a hard time getting their kids. And if they don't even have a bus pass, that creates an issue as well. So I know I've been in touch with the bus barn, and they're currently and actively trying to get bus drivers. So I'm well aware of that. But in the meantime, we still have kids that have to go to school and learn. And we've already done the computer stuff, so no one wants to go back to that. That is one thing that I wanted to address and in front of everyone and make sure that we're all aware and working on that. And if we could actively work a little harder or whatever, I know it's the beginning of school, so I do appreciate that and all your efforts. Another second thing, like I said, my wife works a lot and so do I. So with the time. So I have kids in middle school as well, and there is an after-school program that they offer for that. But then I asked the high school students if they offered anything, and they said, well, we do football. So that's good if your kids do football, but if your kids aren't currently in football, from the time they get out at 2, and if a person works at 4:30 and has to drive an hour back and lives 20 to 30 minutes away, maybe we could get another after-school program, or if they were allowed to go to the other middle school program, I don't know, but just something to think about to help improve the stability of parenting for their children and to have a safe place for them to go during work hours and such. So I just wanted to say that whatever we can do to fix these things would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kaminsky?
Good evening, Board. Last school year, I was told by a staff member that the district didn't participate in the Great California Shakeout, which is held every third Thursday in October. I would encourage the district, I went on the Shakeout website, and no Attach B school in the district hadn't registered. So I would encourage the district to participate, as these drills are worthwhile, and you know what you're doing right. The emergency response team that's been organized can practice meeting. And I mean, these drills are, safety drills are required by state law, and the time is given way ahead of time, the time of the drill, so teachers can work around that. So I encourage, again, to participate. I did notice on, it's not an active, on the agenda, but it's not a voting item. The first read of Board Policy 6146.1, high school graduation requirements. As it reads now, it says there'll be a lessening of English language arts from the current requirement of 4 years to 3. Math from 3 courses to 2, and science 3 years to 2. This does meet the minimum state high school graduation requirements, but I would hope you'd consider keeping the current district standard. And these were last visited in 2019 when the board at that time raised the requirement in science from 2 courses to 3. I would hope that the administration, counselors, and faculty would be consulted. If they were consulted, did they wish to lower the graduation requirements? And again, if so, why? I subbed yesterday at JMS for the band teacher, and luckily for me and the kids, she did not have me lead the band, direct the band, or the chorus. She had me do a Capturing Kids' Hearts lesson, and it was on positive affirmations, and I thought first of all, a few of those classes, the kids are mixed, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And it was a good way for them to get to know each other. And I had a lot of positive feedback from each period on the kids that received positive affirmation as we practiced. They said they felt good, they were humble, didn't know people felt about them that way. So it was a real good lesson. And finally, I would like to publicly thank Mr. Intezari for his generous donation toward tickets he purchased for the Rotary Lions Club Apple Drop for the Apple Fest this coming October 15th. I encourage all TUSD employees to purchase a ticket if you see one of the clubs selling tickets at a local retailer. The funds are used by Rotary for our kindergarten literacy book donation, rewarding improving JMS students, and for both clubs, Tehachapi High School scholarships. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, the consent agenda. All consent agenda items are considered to be routine by the Board of Trustees and will be taken together as one action. There will be no separate discussion of items unless a board member so requests. If it is determined that an item needs to be pulled for a separate motion, the board president will call for a separate vote. Are there any questions or comments from the board regarding the consent agenda?
I have a question. Did you ask if there were any further speakers after Mr. Kaminsky?
I did not.
Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Kelly. Are there any additional public comments? I apologize. I meant to look for the hands raised. Okay, fortunately, not. Again, if there's a comment on an action item, you can still raise your hand at that point as well. Any comments from the public concerning consent agenda items? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to agenda item 6. First read, board policies. Superintendent, do you have some information for us?
Yes, just a bit. There's a number of policies that are listed as first read. These are all recommendations that come from CSBA. So the changes that have been proposed to our board policy are not initiated by our staff or myself, but we do review them by department based on the recommendations from CSBA and bring those forward to the board. A great number of them are impacted and reflect new law or new requirements that come from the state. And within the board summary notes, I did make some of those notations for you. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, this is a first read. Are there any comments from the board or comments from the public? I do have a couple of questions from a board member, trustee Napier, that could not be here this evening. Question 1 is, why are these changes being proposed? Why did we make changes in 2019 and then change now? 2, who triggered these changes? And number 3, has the staff at the high school been consulted on these changes? If yes, please provide dates of the meetings.
So are you referencing a specific policy or all of the policies?
Let's see. Draft policy 6146.1.
Okay, very good. And I think that was one that Mr. Kaminsky was referencing as well. So I think the first couple of questions that you asked, I may have answered that, but I'll reiterate that the changes are the recommendations that come from the California School Boards Association. Primarily, they're based on changes in legislation. And when what they do is they issue a policy guide sheet that tells us, in fact, I have one here, that tells us the different policies that they're recommending for the latest legislation that comes up. And those are how the majority of our board policies and administrative regulation are established. So it's really not through myself or anybody on our team coming up with ideas that, hey, we want a board policy on this. These are changes that come to us from California School Boards Association. With regard to, I believe you said it was 6146.1, high school graduation requirements. This is very specific. There was new law that came out with regard to students who were impacted by virtual learning, and their graduation requirements may have been impacted by their ability to complete units in the time frame for their graduation. And some of those kids are still working towards completing graduation if they didn't graduate with their high school cohort. So this does not change our standard high school graduation requirements that have certainly been increased and raised over the last year or so. But this does apply to students who were impacted during COVID-19 and the time when kids were not able to come to school. So it's got a narrow scope, but I'd be happy to follow up with the board with any other questions and send out additional information. So it's very narrow, and again, these are first reads, so it won't impact all students, but just strictly those students. And when it comes to consulting with staff, when it comes to the law, we don't go to staff first and find out if they want to do it or not. We work to modify our policy to be compliant with the law, and then once the board passes those regulations, then we work to inform staff of what the changes in law and requirement are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments from the board? Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Oh, excuse me, please come up. Can you state your name, please?
Yes, Nick Tanaka, just a small point of clarification. So you said that this particular change is specifically for kids who were impacted due to distance learning. Does that imply that the standard will eventually revert back to what it is presently in the future?
So I think you're misinterpreting what I said. Let me read you from the policy guidance straight from CSBA, okay? Maybe that will help. That policy updated to clarify requirements for mathematics coursework reflects new law, which requires districts to exempt a student from district graduation requirements if the student was in third or fourth year of high school during 2020-2021 school year and is not on track to graduate in 4 years. And to provide the student who was enrolled in the third or fourth year of high school during that year and who is not on track to graduate that year or in 21-22, the opportunity to complete the statewide coursework required for graduation, but may include, but not limited to, completion of coursework through a fifth year of instruction, credit recovery, or other opportunities. And for some of our kids who did not graduate in 21-22, this would be their fifth year. And so we want to make sure that they are provided with those opportunities. So it doesn't impact all the other students.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'd like to give us a 5-minute break. We'll recess and return at 6 o'clock p.m. All right, if everyone could make their way to their seats. Okay, resuming at 6:04 PM. Moving on to agenda item 7, business. Good evening, Mr. Entazari.
Thank you, President Weinstein. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So this is the presentation of a revision to our adopted budget for 22-23 fiscal year. Normally, we don't have to do this, but this is usually reserved when there are material changes. As you all know, our budget is based off of the May revision to the governor's budget, but because of some good news that I have to share with you, we are here to kind of just share as an informational item, it's not an action item, what the impact is and what that means for us for this year. So we're going to talk about, compare what we adopted originally based on the May revise and what we know now. We're going to talk about the ongoing funding that has been given to us for 22-23 and the future. We are also entitled to some one-time funding, which we're going to talk about. Compare what we spent last year versus what we're spending this year to kind of bring some context. And also, of course, it wouldn't be a business conversation without some economic considerations. All right, next slide, please. So we're going to jump right into it. This is a breakdown of our revenues. So here we're going to compare the adopted budget. That's what was presented at the June meeting. And then the revised budget. This is based on the new information from the enacted budget. So you can see here for the LCFF sources, so the money we have for attendance, that's based on a combination of local taxes and state aid. We have an increase of 4.8 million. For those that are kind of new to school districts and our funding, having a 6.5% COLA as we initially were estimating is what is already huge, but they have added another 6.28% to the LCFF base funding for different areas. So that's about 12%, which impacted our budget for LCFF by $4.8 million. And we'll kind of talk about what that consists of. As we kind of said at the June meeting, we anticipated that this was coming, so that's why the initial negative or the deficit spending projections, why we weren't too nervous about it. Our federal revenues remain the same. The state revenues, this is impacted by 2 block grants that we'll talk about, which bring in about $6 million in one-time money. So the total impact to our budget is a 17% increase worth $10.8 million. Hooray! Next slide, please. All right. So all of the material impacts were at the state level. They've impacted our revenues, but the expenditures are projected the same. We didn't have any material changes, but as I mentioned, this isn't a action item. The formal budget revisions will be in December. So we're still projecting $64.5 million worth of expenditures, but now our revenue went up from 62 to 72 million. So this is good news. All right, next slide, please. All right, so here we're going to break down what the ongoing money is going to be. So the increases and what this means for us. So the base grant was increased by another 6.28%, which is a $4 million impact for the 22-23 year. One of the things that has changed is that typically your funding is based on your ADA for either the higher of your current year or your prior year, but due to the statewide declining enrollment throughout school districts, they've enacted a new way of calculating your ADA, which includes the average of your last 3 years. So this is going to create what they've been referring to as a soft landing, as statewide we're experiencing, people moving out of state, people having less kids, so schools are experiencing declining enrollment, and that does have a negative impact on our ADA, but this at least kind of alleviates that burden. We're also going to see an increase in home-to-school transportation. So this is built into the LCFF. We're going to see an increase of $736,000. We were receiving about $580,000, but to put that into perspective, we went from receiving 20% of what it costs to run a transportation department to 60%. So it still encroaches on the general fund, but this has been something that the state has finally listened to, that we need more funds to provide transportation. Also, special education, this was included, this did not change, but we just wanted to highlight that the special education population does receive an add-on amount, and that is subject to the COLA. So that did go up from $715 per ADA to $820. But of course, special education is also requiring a contribution from the general fund just because of the nature of that work. Higher staff count, smaller classes. But it's definitely something that's a necessity. So it's not a problem that it encroaches on the general fund, but it is something that we do have to manage. Next slide, please. Continuing on ongoing funding, we have universal school meals. This is exciting because we have kind of wanted at this level to be able to provide meals for free. I mean, a lot of times you'll see, I don't know if that's necessarily true in Tehachapi, but a lot of kids are incentivized to come to school for the meal, right? So now the state has required that every school district must serve at least 2 free meals per day. So we offer breakfast and lunch to any student that requests it. We are still part of the National School Lunch Program. The National School Lunch Program is a federal program. And what it used to do is it used to reimburse you for some of your meals, depending if you had a student that qualified for a free meal or a reduced price meal based on income. There are other factors as well, but income was the one that we would solicit these applications for meals. So it's kind of a problem because the free and reduced meal application was how the state would determine students that were in need, right? So now there's no incentive to really apply for a free meal, but you'll see throughout when I use the term UPP, unduplicated pupil percentage. That's just the state's mathy way of saying the population of your students that are high need. So this is just kind of a reoccurring theme, but it does create an issue for our supplemental funding, for that money that we receive for that population of student. Moving on, we'll talk about the Expanded Learning Opportunity Program. We did touch on this previously. That has not changed, but it's still it's important to highlight that the state's initiative is to increase the day to 9 hours. That kind of presents an issue sometimes when the workday is about 8 hours. That's why we've contracted with the Boys and Girls Club, and we have additional staffing to meet the needs in order to operate a 9-hour school day. Also to offer 6 weeks outside of the school year of other enriching opportunities. We also have transitional kindergarten. So essentially we've added another grade. That is additional work, additional resources, additional spaces, and especially with the adult to student ratio, that's going to go from 1 to 12 students to 1 adult to every 10 students by 23-24. It's also an increase of resources that need to be dedicated to this population of student, but we will be seeing a $2,800 per ADA supplement to that. Next slide, please. All right, so we touched on all the ongoing funding, right? So it's ongoing because the expectation is that we are providing these services to these students. So for the one-time funding, we're talking about the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant, and I'd like to bring attention to the word emergency. So it's great. It's great to receive more funds. It's really fun as the business person to see all the really cool things that Instructional Services is doing, that our Dr. Porter's doing over at TILA and the ELO program. But there's a reason why we're getting this money, and it's because our future outlook has some negative pressures, whether it's inflation, whether it's declining enrollment. This is essentially an extension of our COVID funds, but not for the kind of pandemic purpose, but more for the addressing learning loss, the ability to sustain our intervention, our increased academic services, a lot of the programs that we offer, having a social worker at every school site, having the Pump It Up PE, which provides collaboration time for teachers, but also activity for our students, school psychologists, the list goes on and on. So the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant is until good for June 30, 2028. So because it's a one-time receipt of funds, we are going to be making a plan on how it's going to be spent in order to sustain a lot of these programs moving forward. We also have the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant. I know that's a long name, so we'll just call it the Block Grant for Arts, and that is $2.3 million. And the intention of that is very similar, just to maintain these services that we've had, because you can't go 2 years of not having school, not having that developmental time for these students at that young age, and think that, okay, well, 3 years of money, you should have fixed it by now, and back we go to public schools being funded at just enough to operate, right? So the intention of these funds is to continue our elevated level of services and just really put our resources forward toward these kids. These funds expire in 2026, so the idea will be to maintain, instead of having a music director split between the middle school and the high school, to have two, to make sure that the supplies, the instruments, whatever you can imagine for these programs, to maintain them. The emergency funding is just intended to maintain these services and address learning loss. That's if I had to boil it down to one point. But this total of about $6 million is very exciting news for us, because without it, we wouldn't be able to sustain what we have. We would have to start making decisions that are really tough, and this alleviates that burden for the near future. Next slide, please. Are there any questions, by the way? We talked on the ongoing and one-time funds. No? Okay. So here we're going to just kind of compare. So as you can see here, I have the expenditures broken down by category. We have the certificated salaries, classified salaries, employee benefits. So what you see on the right in red, we're comparing last year's actual expenses to this year's estimated expenses. And as you can see, there's an increase of about $6.5 million. Our salary, a lot of our employees are on a schedule that have anticipated increases, right? So if you complete a full year, you move along the schedule, and that increase can be anywhere from 2 to 5%, just kind of depends on where you're at. And so we're seeing increases there. You'll notice a 17% increase for employee benefits. That's because nothing comes free. A benefit, when people talk about working for a government agency and then there are benefits like retirement benefits, the money comes from somewhere, and that comes from the employer. So we contribute somewhere between 20 to 25% of most employee salaries towards this benefit, the CalPERS and CalSTRS. And that cost to the district has increased by 15%, and that's significant. So we're seeing about a $2.5 million increase in that area. To adjust, books and supplies, you'll notice, is decreasing by 26%, and that's because, as I had mentioned a lot last year, is that we knew inflation was coming, right? You can't print that kind of money and not expect prices to go up, especially with demand high and supply low. So we put a lot of our resources forward, and the biggest example is having like the smart boards, or they're called New Lines, but a lot of people just informally know them as smart boards in essentially every classroom district-wide, right? And so that's a heavy expense. We did have our technology replenishment program. We went 1 year without it, but Ryan McKay over in IT doubled up on the replenishment, and we've upgraded phones. We've made sure that a lot of our needs in terms of the stuff got met. So the need for that to continue is not necessarily sustainable, but we've met that need, and now we have other things to address. So we're experiencing a little bit of savings, decreasing that stuff budget, because that's kind of where we start in order to meet the increasing costs that we see moving forward. So just kind of in combination, we're spending 11% more this year, or projected to spend 11% more this year than we did last year. Next slide, please. So economic considerations. So while more money is great, it's important to really understand, well, why are we getting it? Why, if there appears to be a need for it, and that's because, as everyone knows, rising costs. We're experiencing over 7% inflation typically in California. We would expect about 3%, so to more than double in a single year, and we don't know if that's ongoing, right? So that's something to consider. As I mentioned, the retiree benefits increased by 15%, and that's a very significant increase to our costs. Although we're getting one-time funding, discretionary block grants, the intention of it is to address the declining revenues, because if there are less students, there are less funds. But it does not mean that the need goes away. It just, because a few students or tens of students, let's say a school has 20 less students. It doesn't mean that they don't need a social worker, that they don't need a school psychologist, they don't need a band program, they don't need, the list goes on, right? And then for multi-year projections, so the state has us estimating that we're going to continue to receive in the neighborhood of 5% next year and the year after. As I mentioned, for those of you that are not new to this, that's an astronomical number and probably one of the highest you've ever seen. I don't know if you want to rely on California future economics, but that does create an issue for us, because even if it increases by the rates we're being told, that by what we're being promised, because of our declining enrollment, or at least the projected declining enrollment, we're only seeing about a 1% to 2% increase. So when you have 7% increase in costs, 15% increase in benefits, but only a 1 or 2 or maybe 3% increase in revenue, at a certain point, the money has to come from somewhere. So this is something that we're I apologize. We are very much keeping a close eye on. We continue to recommend a positive certification, which means that for this year and the next 2 years, we're able to meet our obligations without issue. So that concludes this update for our revision. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Mr. Ansari? I do. Mr. McKay, can you go back one slide, please? So the capital expenditures. Biggest number up there. I expected you to speak about it, but you didn't. So 576% for that capital expenditures. Can you give us an idea of what we're doing with that?
Yes. So capital expenditures is essentially like big ticket items, things that when you're purchasing assets, right? So if I purchase a stapler, it's just an expense. I bought a stapler. I spent $10 on a stapler. If I buy a truck, a $30,000 truck, I have a $30,000 asset. Capital expenditures, so we're still budgeting for improvements, whether it's HVAC upgrades, modernization, improvements. We're still planning for the Wells project. It's just, there's a requirement to budget for the expense, especially when the funds have a timeline. But that is money that if it was not budgeted in capital expense, then it would be spent through one of the other different areas. Last year, we only spent $497,000, but we do anticipate spending additional funds on some of these improvements. Specifically, the goal is to have every classroom on a upgraded air conditioning system, and we're almost there, and items like that. So does that kind of answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on to item 2. Approval of the agreement between Kern County Superintendent of Schools and Tehachapi Unified School District for Camp Keep participation.
Thank you, President Weinstein. This was touched on by our Chief of Instruction, Andrea Paxton. Camp Keep is located at Rancho El Chorro near Morro Bay and offers overnight camps. We intend to take 8th grade students broken out into 2 groups to participate in the Keep by the Sea program, which is for 5 days in October 10th to the 14th, and then the 24th to the 28th. The intent is to provide a high-quality, hands-on program to learn about the environment through a scientific lens. JMS 8th graders will have the opportunity to go free of charge, at least free to them. This will cost the district $112,530 and will be funded by the general funds that are attached to LCAP Goal 3, Action 11 for hands-on experiences. We seek your approval for this agreement.
Any questions or comments? So this is a new program for the 8th grade.
My understanding is that Camp Keep was previously a TUSD favorite program. I don't have specifics as to who, but this is at a new site for their program. I believe it opened 2 years ago or maybe 1 year ago, but it seems to be a big hit and excited to bring it back.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Do I have a motion to approve the agreement between Kern County Superintendent of Schools and the Tehachapi Unified School District for Camp Keep participation?
I'll make the motion.
Kelly, a second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 3, approval of clinical practice agreement between California State University Bakersfield and Tehachapi Unified School District for administrator candidates. Mr. Antazari.
Thank you, President Weinstein. This agreement allows Cal State Bakersfield to place a student administrator in order to receive administrative experience through clinical practice for one of their candidates who is also a district employee. Through their admin training and credentialing program. There is no monetary obligation required for this district, but we do seek to provide this as part of their administrative program and training. We seek your approval for the agreement.
Questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Do I have a motion to approve this agreement?
Kelly, I make the motion.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 4, approval of special use event application with the City of Tehachapi for use of the city streets for the homecoming parade on September 30th, 2022.
Thank you, President Weinstein. The Tehachapi High School Association student body is holding the homecoming parade for the 22-23 school year on September 30th. And this was discontinued in the past few years, so we're excited to bring it back. There is only a $200 refundable deposit, which will be covered by the Tehachapi High School ASB. We seek your approval for this agreement.
Any questions or comments from the board? What time of the day does the parade take place?
1 second, I can get that for you.
It looks like 11 a.m. to noon.
11 a.m. to noon. Thank you.
I'll go with that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Do I have a motion to approve the special use event application for the homecoming parade on September 30th?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, approval of declaring certain district property as surplus obsolete. Mr. Antazari.
Thank you, President Weinstein. The Tehachapi High School is seeking to identify certain obsolete textbooks and materials as obsolete in order to declare them surplus and dispose of them. We seek your approval.
Questions or comments from the board? Are there any questions or comments from the public? Do I have a motion to approve declaring certain district property as surplus or obsolete?
So moved.
Kelly, a second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, Ms. Amaker.
President Weinstein,
Aye.
Clerk Wood,
Aye.
Trustee Kelly,
Aye.
Trustee Kermode,
Aye.
Trustee Scott,
Aye.
Thank you, motion carries. And thank you, Mr. Antazari. Moving on to instructional services and Mrs. Paxton.
Good evening.
Good evening. Information item, a Williams complaint quarterly report.
Okay. California Code of Regulations requires a Williams complaint report to be provided to the board on a quarterly basis. There were no Williams complaints filed for the period of April 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2022.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? As this is an informational item, we'll move on to item 2. Approval of appointment of certificated personnel to serve on the district's 2022-2023 administrative panel.
I'm seeking the board's approval for administrative panels for individual student expulsion and reinstatement hearings, which shall be formed by the superintendent or designee from the bank of certificated personnel appointed by the board. In the case of each student, the expulsion panel shall consist of 3 to 5 of the appointed personnel, none of whom shall be on the staff of the school in which the student is enrolled. Expulsion and reinstatement hearings before the administrative panel shall be conducted in compliance with Ed Code 48918 requirements and Board Policy and Administrative Regulations 5144.1.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Public questions or comments? Do I have a motion to approve the appointment of certificated personnel to serve on the district's 2022-2023 administrative panel?
Kelly, I make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 3, approval of college credit petition.
A senior student at Tehachapi High School would like to petition to participate in dual enrollment during the fall semester. The student has had concurrent enrollment at Saracoso during their sophomore and junior year and has received strong marks in their coursework at Tehachapi High School and Saracoso College. The student would like the board to approve participation in 4 courses at Saracoso that would exceed the 11-unit threshold. In accordance with board policy, we have to provide opportunities for eligible district students. The governing board, upon recommendation of the principal and with parent guardian consent, may authorize a student to apply for attendance at a community college during any session or term at a special, part-time, or full-time student to undertake 1 or more courses of instruction offered at the community college level.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by the board?
I'm gonna make one. You know, I do enjoy seeing these, and Ms. Libatique, I do appreciate you obviously supporting this student, with you and your staff supporting this student and bringing this to our attention. I think a lot of us here went to college, and 15 extra units with a senior high school load, even if they don't have a full senior load, is just kudos and congratulations. So I appreciate all of it.
Any other questions or comments from the board or the public?
Would this affect just the student that's petitioned, or is this going to go on for other students?
It's just for this particular student who's
One
applying for this. So each student that would like to take college courses that exceed the 11-unit threshold, it has to be brought to the board. So it's on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Do I have a motion to approve the college credit petition?
I'll make the motion.
Kelly, a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank
Mrs.
you.
Paxton. Moving on to personnel. Welcome, Dr. Romero.
Good evening, President Weinstein, board members, Superintendent Larson Everson. I have the, excuse me, I have something in my throat. This month's certificated report includes the hiring of 7 open certificated positions and 4 confidential management positions. In addition, the report includes 14 extra duty assignments, 2 certificated stipends, and 10 column changes. The report also shows the hiring of 7 additional substitutes and 3 late declined offers that had previously been approved. Lastly, it includes the resignation of 7 employees.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Do I have a motion to approve, ratify the certificated personnel report?
So moved.
Kelly, a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to approval ratification of the classified personnel report.
Thank you, President Weinstein. This month's classified report includes the staffing of 22 open positions and 11 classified changes in assignments and the resignations of 14 staff members. There are a number of employee resignations that you will notice reflect the month of June due to employees resigning in July or August before the first day of school. Since these employees did not work in those months, we need to reflect the last date worked. Lastly, the report reflects the retirement of 1 employee.
Questions or comments from the board?
I do. Hey, Dr. Romero.
Hi.
I know you guys, your department has worked quite a bit to making sure that we're fully staffed, obviously with all these resignments or resignings and everything else. Are we close to 100% of what we anticipated or what we prefer to start the year with?
Could you repeat the last question? It was hard to hear
Are we
you.
close to 100% or at 100%
I
of
don't-
what we
yeah.
consider fully
I don't
staffed?
mean to laugh, but I think anyone in the United States would kind of chuckle at that because of not only the workforce shortage, but the teacher shortage. I'm extremely hard on myself, and I've had many conversations with Superintendent Larson Everson. We started the school year with 6 open teacher positions. We're now down to 4. I'm hoping in the next week to bring that to 2. I have colleagues all up and down California, and they're laughing at my anxiety over the 2 because they're battling with 25, 30, 200. We're doing our best. We're seeing a lot of people move out of the state. A lot of the resignations are because people are leaving. And so when you have that high influx of moving, on top of it's just naturally the time of the year and trying to recruit, it's been difficult. We're almost there for teachers. Classified, it's always rotating and roving. We would never be 100% for classified personnel because of the turnover that they just naturally bring in.
And I am glad that you laughed because it's either laugh or cry and then throw something at me for asking that question, right? But it's a chance for you to let us know where we stand as a district, but also to give yourself and your department kudos because if we're down to, within weeks, down to only 2 for that one and then a revolving number that we're comfortable with for classified, I'm good. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. Most of my colleagues have went back in the classroom, so.
Any additional questions or comments from the public? No? Do we have a motion to approve, ratify the classified personnel report?
Kelly, make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 3, approval of variable term waiver or provisional internship permit, multiple subject.
So I bring to you 3 candidates that we are asking for the approval to issue them a variable term waiver as stated per Ed Code. Ed Code allows these teacher candidates to be hired under the variable term waiver as long as they are currently enrolled in a program or working towards completion of the credential.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Do I have a motion to approve the variable term waiver or provisional internship permit, multiple subject?
Kelly, make the motion.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, moving on to item 10. Superintendent Larson Everson will introduce us to a new item called the launch.
That's right, the launch. We are embracing and integrating Capturing Kids' Hearts in everything that we do, including right here in the boardroom. So in Capturing Kids' Hearts, the Excel model, the L at the end of Excel stands for launch. And launch really has to do with the way that we end a class or a gathering or a meeting, and the way that we send our students on to the rest of their day, and ensuring that we're sending them on with positivity and energy. And so I'll give you the definition of what Webster says launch means. The first definition provided is to send forth with some force. And the second part is to start a person on some course, career, or enterprise. And both of these things certainly imply momentum, which helps drive all of us forward. So to be consistent with Capturing Kids' Hearts, starting here and now, we're going to do a launch when we close out our open sessions at each board meeting. I'll be inviting team members to come up just like we did this evening with the pledge to contribute a launch and send us off on a positive note, because some of us say our goodbyes to the public and we go into closed session, or we end our meeting and we want to end when we adjourn on a positive note. So tonight's launch, I have the honor of providing you a quote from Kobe Bryant, who said, "The most important thing is to try and inspire people so they can be great in whatever they want to do." Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 11, public comments for closed session. Members of the public will be given an opportunity to speak on closed session items. Persons wishing to address the board under this item can fill out a request or raise your hand. Any comments, public comments for closed session? Seeing no hands raised, we will adjourn to closed session at 6:42 PM. Thank you.
item.
Okay, good evening, and once again, reconvening back to open session at 8:06 PM. Report on action taken in closed session. Conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, paragraph 1 of subdivision D of Government Code Section 54956.9, matters OAH case number 2022-06-0403. In closed session, a unanimous vote of the 5 members present approved the settlement agreement on student case OAH 2022-06-0403. The agreement provides for compensatory services and associated legal fees. Public Employment Governance Code 54957, request for an unpaid leave of absence, classified employee 4554. Board took action by unanimous vote of the 5 members present to approve the 60-day unpaid leave of a SPED paraprofessional employee number 4554. There being no further business to come before the board, the meeting is adjourned at approximately 8:08 PM. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.